it's Amory, and today I wanted to share with you my, what month is this? Hi guys, it's Amory, and I wanted to share with you my April wrap-up and my May TBR. Now normally I don't do TBRs because number one, I'm a moody reader, so I change all the time. I mean, for whatever reason, I may just completely abandon what I thought I was going to read as far as like the next 4 books down and read something different. Now before I get into my wrap-ups, I do actually read more than I always share on this channel. Sometimes I don't share everything because I may have not finished it. I don't really want to tell you about a book that I haven't finished if I don't intend on finishing it. It may be that I just didn't enjoy the book, it may be that I kind of zoned out of it and kind of became disinterested, but for whatever reason, if I really don't like a book, I won't give you my thoughts on a book that I haven't finished, because I don't really think that's fair to the book. That was like a little mini little disclaimer thing I hadn't intended on going into. Anyway, let's get to it. Now some of you may have remembered from my most anticipated videos book that A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab was one of my most anticipated for the year. This book definitely lived up to all expectations. I love this book. You can click on the book here if you want to see the explanation for this book, but in a nutshell, you have parallel Londons, you have a guy who can travel between the Londons, full of magic and wonder, different worlds, very cool, the first of a trilogy. I loved the writing. As always, V.E. Schwab really delivers when it comes to her writing. I was really impressed with just the structure of this book, the way it was laid out as far as the foreshadowing. Something that she did that was similar to what Joe Hill did in Nosferatu that I really appreciated as a reader and a writer. She gave us a little more than a person's name. If they have an important role to play, even if it's just for a moment, she gives us a little more than just this person got stabbed and that's it, and moving on. When a writer does that, it makes me feel like when bad things happen to characters in books, I actually care. I really enjoyed this book. I was trying to decide whether or not I loved this book better than Vicious, about superheroes and supervillains that V.E. Schwab wrote, and I felt like they were kind of tied. Then I was thinking about it more, and then I felt like when it comes to Vicious, the themes are a little more present as far as like the bigger picture. Here I would say there's some things about loneliness, belonging, family, but they're not as explored as deeply as the themes in Vicious, which to me I gathered are right and wrong, good and evil, black and white, the division between good and evil, and if there is such a thing. Besides that slight difference, which for me put Vicious slightly ahead of A Darker Shade of Magic, this is still one of my favorite books of the year. This is still a fantastic book. I definitely highly recommend this one. And it's book 1 out of 3, so it's early, it's not too late to jump on this train. I saw this book, The Sculptor by McCloud, in the UK, and I didn't buy it because it's pretty hefty, it's pretty heavy. I almost got it from Waterstones, but I was like, how am I going to pack this baby? It's just not happening. So I waited till I got back and I picked it up. Normally I don't pay attention so much to blurbs, but Neil Gaiman said it's the best graphic novel I've read in years. That intrigued me. I flipped through it and I really loved the story premise, so I checked it out. I didn't read it all in one sitting because it's pretty long, but it's really, really good. And I think as the story continued, it had a lot of resonance for me as an artist. The story is about a young sculptor who's very passionate about his work. He made a splash in the art world. He was kind of patronized, highly lauded by a bigwig in that world, and something happened and they fell out, and after that he was just totally blacklisted. And I think it's been a few years now, and he's depressed. He doesn't know what to do as far as creating the work. He feels kind of like his hands are tied. As a sculptor, he feels like he's unable to fulfill his destiny, and all he cares about is his art. Without telling you too much, he basically makes a pact with death. Death will show him the door to success. He won't actually push him through that door, but he will take him there and allow him to make his own decisions, but he's pretty much ensuring ultimate success. But the exchange is that he only has 1 year to live. No matter what happens, he has 1 year, and then we see what happens in that year. One of the biggest takeaways for me in this book was the whole idea that, you know, as artists, we want to create something that lasts. My mother always told me, no matter what we do in this life, do what you do it because you love it, but don't do things to be remembered or to be exalted or to be adored, even leaving a legacy. There's so many people who want to do things like leave a legacy for the family, and I totally understand that. At the same time, the only thing that we can really do is spread love, have relationships, share with one another, because those are the only things that really, really last. Even if you look at ancient structures, sometimes we don't know exactly how they got there. At one point, everyone did. And then over time, things are forgotten. We may look at that thing, we may speculate, but that person, most likely we'll forget. We'll forget who created this and who created that and who built this castle and who created that pyramid. And then people who want to leave money for their families. You know, I want to make sure my line lives on. You could make billions of dollars for your family. And then 3 generations down the line, the money could be squandered. And then what was the point? Recognition, accomplishments, wanting your name to live on, you know, that whole fame, I want to live forever. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. So it isn't good to live for that. All things will one day be forgotten. Names will be lost. And all that will exist will be our connection to other people and the love that we share. I like how he was able to encapsulate that message. It's definitely worth a read. It's not a fast read. This is one pretty thick book, but it's definitely worth it. Another one of my favorites of the year. Love is all there is. Another book I read was The Miniaturist by Jessie Burton. This book is really, really huge, got so much buzz this year. I enjoyed this book, but I went into it with different reader expectations, so I think I was a little taken aback by that. The story is about a young girl who's married into a pretty wealthy family, although the family really consists of a man, her new husband, and his sister in a big house in Amsterdam. He's kind of off doing his own thing all the time. His sister can be kind of antagonistic, and there's a servant girl, and then a black man who is kind of like, I don't want to call it a butler. What do they call it in Downton Abbey? Basically, she goes into this new home, she's isolated from her family, she doesn't know what to do, and her husband presents her with this huge house, a dollhouse. And then she starts getting pieces from a miniaturist who lives in the city. Little by little, she starts to get pieces that kind of corresponds to what's happening in her house. Pieces that make it seem as if the miniaturist knows things that are going to happen before they happen. Things that have to do with her household and her home. Very, very creepy. I think part of my issue going into this book was that I had different reader expectations. Like, I was focused very much on the creepy aspect, what's going on with the miniaturist, which makes you think, how will this mystery be solved? How will it slowly unravel? But this story is more about what's happening in the girl's life as far as her adjusting to a new family, and some of the social things that are happening, things that have to do with gender roles, race, class, which would have been fine if I had known that going into it, but I also felt that because it had to do with those things, we couldn't really get deep into those issues because we still had this mystery going on. So I felt like it would have been better if we delved further into this aspect, the miniaturist mystery, or into everything that was happening as far as race and class and all of those things. Now that you know this going in, if you read this, it won't be such an issue. If you're into atmospheric writing, if you're into a slow pace, and if you're into those kind of touch points as well as being transported back in time, because she really did a great job of creating this world in this historical fiction, then you may really enjoy The Miniaturist. I also listened to the audiobook for Sweetness No. 9 by Stephen Eric Clark. This book was so hilarious. I really loved this book. I did have a qualm about this book, and well, first let me tell you what the book was about. You have a guy who works for the flavoring industry. Everything that we eat has all these flavors. Even if you have natural flavors, everything's enhanced. That's kind of the reason why some people were comparing it to Fast Food Nation. If you guys haven't read that book is terrific too, Fast Food Nation. But it's not an expose. It's more of, this is the world he's in, this is what's happening in that world, and here's the story. That said, a man gets into the flavoring industry. There's this special sugar called Sweetness No. 9, and it's fantastic. Everybody loves it. It's low in calories. You can eat as much as you want without any consequences. So they think. When he's in the lab, he realizes that there's something wrong with Sweetness No. 9. The rats are lethargic. Some of them have gained a lot of weight. Some of them seem actually depressed. I think one of the rats killed himself. He's thinking about reporting it, then the next day he shows up. All the rats are fine. The test chimps, they're fine too. They're so happy, and they lost all this weight like overnight. So he's like, that's suspicious. These are not the same animals, although the names are still there. That's kind of like the setup for the story. After that, we see him go through time. He never says anything. Sweetness No. 9 is on the market. It's in everything. It's all across the world now. It's in everything from breakfast cereals to sodas to bread. It's kind of like what happens to his family who's ingesting all of this Sweetness No. 9, and how does he come to terms with that, as well as what's going on with his family other than that, just his children growing up, his relationship with his wife. I kind of felt like it was a little bit of a Jonathan Franzen Fast Food Nation mashup. I really enjoyed it, and it's so funny, it's so humorous, and I actually suggest the audiobook if you can get your hands on that because it is so funny. My small qualm, which probably affects a lot because the entire plot hinges on one thing, which is that he doesn't tell the truth. And I just felt like it was kind of a stretch for me to believe that someone, no matter how cowardly, would not say anything about sweetness number 9 when he worked in the lab, saw what happened to the animals, doesn't ingest it himself, but is completely okay with his wife, his pregnant wife, and then his kids growing up eating it. I'm like, who would do that? Without that happening though, without him being so cowardly, there would be no story. So I understand that, but I just feel like there had to have been a better reason for him to not say anything. It was a little unbelievable. But if you can get past that, it's so hilarious. There are so many moments in there that are really true as far as like reflecting life. It's still worth a read. Everything. I'm not going to say too much about this book because it does not come out until September. It's by Nicola Yoon. Her husband did the illustrations inside of the book, and the book is told mostly in prose, but also I am messages, little charts and graphs, little interesting things. It's about a girl who has, I think it's an autoimmune disease. Basically, she can't go outside. If she just encounters any germ, her body will shut down. So she's lived her entire life inside of the house. She has no friends, she can't go out at all. One day, a boy moves in next door and everything changes. That's all I'm going to say about this book. I will tell you guys more about it later. This was one of my favorite books of the year. I loved it so much. I've read it in one sitting. She's so great at showing you how people come together in so few words. The book is not very long. It's so good. It's so good, that's the reason why my TBR doesn't even have any contemporaries on it for this month. I was like, I just want to sit in this book, and I'll read some fantasies or just things that are different. But as far as like the contemporary, let me just hold on to this a little longer. So those are the books that I read in April and a little bit at the end of March, and now I'm going to go into my TBR. I'm currently reading Blue Lily Lily Blue by Maggie Stiefvater. It's book 3 in the Raven cycle. This is one of my favorite series of all time. I'm only on page 55. So far I'm really loving it. Click on the book. I did talk about the Raven cycle and what it's about in one of my videos, so I'm going to put a link there so you know what it's about, because this is book 3. I can't really say much about this other than it's fantastic. The Little Prince was part of my Bookalutions. I did a book tag for this. My mom gave this to me, and I read this a long time ago, but you know, when you read it as a child, you're getting something completely different from it as an adult, and there were some things that I didn't realize happened until recently, so I'm like, I definitely have to reread this. The Girl at Midnight by Melissa Gray. This is about a girl who discovers there's an entire world beneath New York City, a magical world, and she may or may not have something to do with that world. I'm not going to say any more because I don't want to spoil you. I don't want to spoil myself, so I didn't read too much of the flap copy. This right here, it wasn't just the idea that made me want to read the story. It was actually reading a 1-page excerpt of this book. I loved her prose. I loved her writing style, so that's definitely what made me want to check it out. And Ember in the Ashes, I believe this was part of one of my most anticipated reads for 2015 by Sabaa Tahir. You have a girl who has to break into a military academy because her brother is taken as a slave, and then you have a boy in the military academy who's a great soldier and he wants to escape. I don't know much more about that because you know me, I don't like to know too much. But this book takes place in a world that's very similar to ancient Rome. It's a standalone. Many people think that this may actually be the beginning of a series, either a duology or a trilogy. So we'll see. Huge buzz. I think this is probably Penguin's buzziest book this year. It seems to be so, and I'm highly intrigued. I read 2 chapters of it so far, just a peek, a little sample. So far, so good. I'll definitely be reading this one soon, hopefully this month. And finally, this is kind of a change of pace for me. It's the 4-Hour Workweek, the expanded and updated edition by Timothy Ferriss. I actually borrowed this from my sister. I used to read a lot of nonfiction, some books like this and some books like science and history and stuff like that. So I thought this was a good way to kind of give me some pointers on managing my time and managing like my mental space so I can just focus a little better. So that was my April wrap-up and my May TBR. We'll see how many of those May books I actually read in May, because like I told you, I'm a moody reader and I switch things up a lot. But I am reading Blue Lily, Lily Blue by Maggie Stiefvater. So I'll let you guys know how that goes. Definitely share with me in the comments what you're reading this month, what you're planning on reading this month. And don't forget to like the video if you liked it. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys later. Bye!